these horizontal dividers are now in place. I've got matching V-grooves, the top divider and the bottom divider. And I've cut one of the vertical dividers to width. Now the next thing I need to do is to take a hand plane and just bevel these edges so that they match up with the V-groove that we've chopped in with the chisel. Okay, so beveling these things is pretty straightforward. I just use a block plane, tilt it at about 45 degrees. And run it until you've got 45-degree edge beveled and the center line or the peak of that edge stops in the center line of your divider. Flip it over and do the other side. Just let your eye dial in that peak and dial in the two slopes. And there you go. That's all it's to it. Repeat that on the other side. And the divider is ready to be installed. The final order of business on these dividers is to round over the front. And you can do it with a file or start with a hand plane. I usually start and just knock down the sides a little bit of a bevel there. I'll come back with my file. And any of the high points that are left by the plane, I'll knock off. And then I'll just start rounding the whole surface. Blending it in. And then I usually, at the very end, will come in with a profiled sander like this. See that over here better. A little 80 or 100 grit sandpaper. Just smooth it all out. That's really all there is to it. There we go. So that's a completed divider. We can just slide that right into the slots that we made previously. And on to the next ones. So our dividers are now done, and there's a couple of things I wanted to point out before we move on. First of all, the process itself is pretty easy, but there are some things that you can run into if you're not aware of. First of all, when you're cutting these pieces to width, if you make them a little snug, the divider material is thin enough that it can bow these pieces. So as you're installing the various vertical and horizontal dividers, go back and check the pieces that it's abutting into to make sure that they're flat, they haven't got a bulge in them, because that will show up as gaps in your drawers when you fit those in place. Secondly, again, because this material is fairly thin, it's easy for it to warp. And if it warps, you'll end up seeing, depending on which way it bows, you will see gaps at the very end of your miters. In this case, this piece is fairly bowed on me, and I've got a gap here and a gap here. I'll pull that together with a clamp and glue it, but unfortunately, because it's end grain to end grain, or mostly end grain to end grain, standard wood glue won't hold that, so I'll probably use epoxy. I could go back and recut this out of another piece and hope that it doesn't warp. I could also come in here and try to put a fastener underneath. A couple of different ways to do it, but just be aware of some of the problems that you can run into and hopefully adjust for them. If you're concerned, if your stock is really reactionary and you just can't keep it flat, you can always make this divider material 1/4 of an inch. I think that just looks a little bulky, but there's nothing wrong with it, so feel free to adjust the plans accordingly. But dividers are pretty easy, and at this point I don't have any of these glued in, and I may not. I may leave them loose. They'll certainly stay in place once the back is installed, but you can glue them as well. Also, sometimes it's nice to keep them loose until finishing and then finish all of them and then install them. So, that's it. On to making the back. All right, the back is really very easy to make. Just thickness your stock to the dimensions shown in the plans, and figure out which side you want exposed on the back side. So in my case, this is a little uglier. I'm going to put this on the inside. It's a little nicer. I'll put that on the outside. And then you're going to put a bevel on 3 sides. So the bottom is not going to have a bevel, but the 3 sides will have a bevel that will slide into the rabbets that we cut earlier. Then along the edges, if you can see this, I just marked a line about 3/16 of an inch. You could make it even 1/8 of an inch on those 3 sides, and then put also a line, just give me a straight edge line to target for my bevel. So I'm basically going to bevel and connect, create a bevel to connect these 2 lines. This might come in a little bit further as I progress, but that's really all you want to do, is just put a bevel with your hand plane on those 3 sides. So clamp this in place, and do the cross grain first. This would be no different than using power tools or anything else. You'll have a little bit of tear out on the edges, so do the cross grain first. Okay. Then turn around and repeat on the other 2 sides. That's really all there is to doing a raised panel for the back. Well, I ended up having to adjust one side a little bit and the top a little bit, and then I spent time getting the miter in the corners of the pine to line right up with the tip. It'd be a nice 45-degree angle. Have it smooth rather than curved, just for aesthetics. But functionally, this is pretty trivial to do. Again, that 3/16 inch mark on the side was pretty close. And so now you see that the back just slides into these dados, slides right into place. I cut the back just a little bit long, so I'll go ahead and mark the underside and cut it to length so that it's flush with the bottom of the case. And I'll also now get ready to do the spring lock. And all you'll need to do is, with a pencil or a marking knife, just go inside and draw a line at the top of this bottom piece, and then another line at the top or the bottom of the first divider. And that's where we're going to position, that's basically the gap then that we have to work with to position the spring lock. And so go ahead and make those marks, take out the back, clean up the back. By the way, if you did use a hand plane to do this, leave the marks in. There's waviness in here from the hand plane. There's waviness even in these bevels. Leave those in there. That's a real authentic look.